there's not much debate about how important this relationship is. And we're all very disturbed and concerned about the president's desire to make life more difficult for Americans by forcing them to pay the Trump tariff tax, which we know Americans will have to pay if he is successful of imposing these large tariffs. We are all pleased this morning that some news that Trump is already sort of giving up on this ruinous tariff of 145%. That's good news, but we shouldn't give him the Nobel Peace Prize, because it's like the arsonist is starting a fire and then he wants credit for being the fire person to put the fire out. He started this fire. We hope it gets put out and that we have more reasonable trade relationships on a reasonable basis. Well, we hope that that'll be the case, but it hasn't borne out yet.
Having said that, I think both Democrats and Republicans for several years now, and if you think about through the Biden administration, some of the tariffs imposed on China were certainly continued through the Biden White House, that most on both sides of the political aisle have agreed that the relationship between U.S. and China maybe wasn't a fair one. It wasn't balanced. And so something had to change, especially as China's economic might has changed and grown.
Well, listen, there are some reasonable things you can do, and then you can do absolute ruinous things as throwing a grenade into a relationship. And Trump threw a grenade, and, 145% tariffs means that Americans are going to pay double for products that they're buying from China, and that's a significant thing. And it's already caused a job loss in my state because we're down, no ships coming in, no longshoreman jobs, no trucking jobs itself. So yes, there's always a spectrum of action, but I think that what he has proposed would be really ruinous for Americans. Hopefully this will get resolved, that he'll start to see pressure from bond markets as he did the other day, and that this will restrain his madness. We hope that we will be successful in that regard.
I have a little bit of a curveball here, if I may digress for a moment. Governor.
Get ready.
And well, I don't know how you're going to answer this, because Washington State, I don't believe you have an income tax, right? You made me think about the arson putting out the fire. You made me think about the SALT deduction, right? Because President Trump and the Republicans capped the SALT deduction that had been American tax policy for over 100 years in 2017 with the TCJA. And now there's a question about whether or not it survives or in what form it does. I wonder what you think about that as a state, as a former governor of a state that doesn't have an income tax. Does it seem fair to allow state and local taxes to be deducted? Does it avoid double taxation, or do you think that we should have a cap?
It's something I haven't really thought that much about. It's one of those things that when you have a disaster looming, you pay less attention to your parochial issues. I will just say I hope it gets worked out. I will say that. And I hope that we don't end up killing clean energy jobs just to finance tax cuts for the rich. That's the thing that I'm focused on. More parochial issues, to me, are subordinate. And the national economic climate is so at risk right now. That's what I think we got to pay attention to.
All right, so let's go there, because your team did share with us a report from Climate Power. You work with them, and it talks about clean energy jobs in particular created and those that might be clawed back as a result of President Trump's policies, executive actions, tariffs, and more. I will say, coming off of Milken and some of the discussions that I had with folks when it comes to clean energy, green energy, in terms of investing, many said it's going to continue because if you're a global company, you have to think about it on a global level. You have to think about it beyond a 4-year presidential term. And, just companies in many ways, their initiatives will continue going forward. But what's important about this report? What do you think our Bloomberg audience needs to know?
Well, what I think the audience needs to know is that we ought to be very optimistic about the clean energy economy. The growth is spectacular. And the reason is technology is advancing at such a rapid clip. The cost of solar energy has come down 40% in the last 10 years. Wind continues to come down. We have 10 times as much installation as we did 10 years ago. So the rate of the reindustrialization of America through renewable energy is quite profound. But unfortunately, the president, because he has this phobia or mania, he says wind turbines cause cancer, which is just nuts. It just caused jobs all over America. And that ideological fixation has already cost us or jeopardized 62,000 jobs in the United States, which is a spectacular way to shoot yourself in the foot. And the thing that's so disappointing to his multiple efforts, I mean, these are multiple efforts. He threw 1,500 people out of work who were building an offshore wind turbines off the East Coast with 24 hours notice. And he's doing that by refusing to permit these clean energy sources, by attacking the tax policies that allows these industrial jobs to be created. It's just really killing the number one job creator in the country right now is clean energy. So that's really threatening this engine of growth. And it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You know what? Here's the thing that's so frustrating to me. He talks about he wants energy dominance. Well, if you want energy dominance, you shouldn't sideline some of your best athletes, which are folks building the clean energy economy. And so it's very disturbing. And I hope Congress will stop some of his maniac activities to hurt jobs in this country. 62,000 jobs, a lot of job loss.
Well, what about
it right in my state? You
know, we were just talking to Nancy Lazar from Piper Sandler. She's one of the most well-respected economists in the country, and she was applauding a reshoring of manufacturing jobs. Is that not something that you could be optimistic about, that you think might benefit, the people of Washington State, the people of the United States of America?
Well, there's two separate issues here. I think it's important to keep them distinct. There's the tariff issue that you're thinking of that potentially could get some reshoring. If that someday could happen, that would be a fine thing. What I'm referring to is efforts to basically kneecap these new industries in a dozen different ways, starting by literally shutting down the development and construction of these projects, like offshore wind, like his refusal to give permits for solar powers, like his effort to kneecap the Bonneville Power Administration, which is the group charged with the responsibility of building transmission lines so we can build these new energy generating capacity, like telling the Pacific Coast we're not going to be able to move forward with offshore wind. So these are two separate issues. And what I'm addressing are the facial attacks on the policies that we know do grow these jobs domestically, including the tax cuts, which he and the Republicans are threatening right now, to stop the tax breaks to allow these industries to grow, just to give it folks to tax cuts for the wealthiest folks amongst us. And that's probably one of the most dangerous things going on right now.
Governor Inslee, just got about a minute left here. I mean, what we often find, in terms of coverage of global financial markets is that money tends to go where it makes sense. And ultimately, do you have enough faith?
True.
No, it just in terms of, if investors can make money, they're going to go there. If it makes sense, investors will continue to commit to green initiatives. And a lot of companies do think it still makes sense. Might that pick up the slack, even if the political environment isn't supportive at this point? And just unfortunately, got about 40 seconds here.
Yeah, listen, clean energy, this revolution is going to continue. There's no question about the technologies, the cost curve coming down. This is going to continue. But these policies that the president wants to embrace, and to some degrees Republican Congress, is going to retard that pace of change. And we're in a race right now. Look, we're a race for jobs. We're a race for the climate crisis won't make all our towns burn down in the West, too. We're in a race. We don't want to slow down. We're going to win, but we'd rather win fast rather than slow.